first day without seeing any hounds. They were retreating as fast as they could. Suppose you think they washed their hands before they did it?
Was that?
That was bread.
Oh.
Sort of a bread line, past the bread. Looks like it's getting colder. They have thicker coats on. September 29th, Private Miller mentions we were relieved by G Company, 2nd Battalion, and took up support on top of hill in front of artillery. We stayed here a week under shelling. At first I slept in tent, but after ammo dump 100 feet off blew up, I decided to dig a hole. Every night we had to dig trenches in the rain and take it all around. We didn't have a very good time as it was pretty cold. I picked up a German blanket, so it was better off than some. I also got paid. Grub was scarce a day or two as a shell blew up our kitchen. Even they weren't safe back there. The Yankee division was put into reserve, concentrated in and around Verdun. October 17th, the 26th Division moved up and relieved the entire 18th French Division. They occupied this sector until the end of the war. The boys were under constant artillery fire, but they gave it as good as they got it. Private Miller says, October 17th, as usual, my platoon had the outpost about 200 feet from Germans who seemed rather friendly. The trenches were only a bunch of shell holes and of course no dugouts. The mud was pretty bad on account of so much rain. Had plenty of machine gun and artillery fire, so I had to keep low all the time. On this ground, much hard fighting was done, so everything was pretty well shot to pieces. It was by far the worst place I was ever in. The division continued to push on and capture ground among the skeletons of French and German dead from years past. Fighting continued right up until the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. The armistice took effect. On the occasion of the visit of President Woodrow Wilson to General Headquarters, December 24th, 25th, the Guard of Honor was made up of elements of the 102nd Infantry. Here's a quote from Corporal Toll on the armistice, and to leave here tomorrow. The armistice was signed at 5 this a.m. At 11 today, the cannon roared and bells rang. We nearly went wild. We had parades and a great time. Went into St. Denis tonight, and the people were having a wild time. Lots of excitement. This map kind of shows you where the division kind of went. That was the first action that they saw around Soissons. They moved down to the port in the Toul sector there, up to around Chateau Thierry, over to Verdun, and then just up a little ways. That's when the armistice had taken place. So, this is right at the end of the war, and here's a review of the troops. Private Miller mentions December 25th, Xmas, old dog, yeah. Nobody dared to wish a Merry Christmas to anyone. If he had, he would have gotten a hobnail side of the head. Piled out at 3 a.m. and had a 4-hour auto ride to Landry, where we were assembled as the First Army. The review field was a little distance from the town. It was nothing but a wheat field covered with mud and water. This is where he was. But that was all right, as Blackjack and Woodrow had a boardwalk laid for them. I was damn cold, and we had to go bareheaded and stand at attention for about a half an hour at 10 a.m. while the president came into the stand and posed for the boobies. The cameramen were thick as flies, and I thought they never would get through. Finally, General Pershing read a few lines, introducing WW, who in turn made a few remarks. Then the band started up, and we splashed past company front. After we passed, we double-timed about a mile to get out of the way for the others. The trucks were a couple of miles off, and we were darn glad to get into them again. It was a long ride back, and it grew colder and colder, and finally we had quite a snowstorm. It began to look like Xmas. We reached Mondre in time for supper, for roast pig, etc. Later, the YMCA gave out packages from the folks back home with candy, tobacco, and gum. And to keep busy, they had these games that they did. I guess the only equipment they had was their own, so, you know, they would see who could take off their putties the fastest. They were just wrappings that went around their legs to keep the water out of their shoes. And they'd race somewhere, come back, put them back on. Sort of the Olympics for World War I troops. Of course, they were used to doing that by now. But the mud was there too. But that gathered a pretty good crowd. Real professional. A little bit of football too. Had to keep them busy. You know, a fake French kiss there. And I guess they won first prize in something. Finally, the first troops boarded ships for home on March 30th at St. Nazaire. On April 4th, the big transport ship Mount Vernon with 5,824 soldiers, including Corporal Toll, steamed into Boston Harbor. On April 2nd, the Agamemnon, which, why would you call a ship that name? I have no idea. Arrived with Private Miller. The last of the division came home on the battleship New Jersey on April 21st. A massive reception and parade took place on the 25th when 1 million people turned out to line the streets of Boston to cheer on the Yankee division. This is their version of the duck boats, you know, when our sports teams win. 2 days later, the division was mustered out of service. And then here at home, we had our own welcome home day, September 19th, 1919. Left to right is Emery Raymond. Must have been in the back here.
It is.
Roland Houghton, Roger Battles. Arthur Eaton. Maybe it was him. Paul Derby. Arno Hurd Jr., look familiar? And Guy Miller, who's in the front right here. And this is the whole welcome home group that we've got here. Of course, we know this Harold Toll. And here's Guy Miller over here. Up here, this was Roland Cannon's brother, George. He had two brothers that were serving at the time. When we had the Memorial Day
exhibit
things, the show that was set up at the society there. This is who we use the Navy uniform from, Arthur K. Rice.
Is that Harry Howard? Is that your neighbor?
That Harry Howard lived across the street from me when I was a little kid. Yep, I do remember him. Tall, very tall guy. So Harold
Harry
Toll-
Withington on the top is
Yep.
one of my ankles also.
Oh, there you go.
The second from the right, they're on the top.
Yep, Harold Withington.
And Harold is just below him.
Harold Toll. Yep, you got it. So Harold served 18 months of service in the American Expeditionary Force overseas, honorably discharged on April 28th, 1919 at Fort Devens. Married town school teacher Marion Walker in 1921, and they lived on Nickel Street. They had 8 children. 4 of his boys served in World War II and 1 in Korea. He worked as a steam engineer and a stationary fireman at a children's furniture factory. Harold's siblings, like we were just talking about, Harley, from left to right, Harley, Dawn, Lily, and there's Harold on the end. In 1922, Harold was elected as the first singular constable for the town of Westminster, a position that he held for 25 years. In 1941, he assumed the position of chief. After his wife passed away in 1947, he married Bertha Hodgkins in 1949. And that's his second wife there on the left. He helped to found the Westminster, the William Miller Post 140, 74 American Legion in Westminster, and served as its commander. 1950, moved to Templeton before moving to Baldwinville. He died on December 14th, 1977, and is buried at Woodside Cemetery. Guy Miller, Guy and Cora, moved to Gardner after the war. He had 4 children. Worked for the Haywood Wakefield Company for 45 years, becoming a division superintendent. He died on September 10th, 1968, and is also buried in Woodside Cemetery. So I just wanted to show you probably the most famous soldier in the Yankee division, which was a little dog named Stubby. In the 102nd, when they were training in Connecticut, he was a stray, came in, they took him in, and then they snuck him on board ship as they were going over France. Once some of the officers had found him, they had taught him to salute, sit up and put his paw up. So then, of course, he became the mascot for the entire division. When he was over there in France, he served in all 17 battles. He stuck around. He barked when he smelled gas. Even when there was a German that was sneaking around trying to map out the place, he barked. He knocked him down, and they took him prisoner. He was wounded twice. He was wounded in the leg and chest, and he was gassed as well. So whilst he was recuperating, some nurses made this little cape for him, and over time he collected medals. And see, there's his Purple Heart over here in the back. And one day, who became his owner, Jeff Conroy, or Jay Conroy, mentioned that he had gone for about a week. He'd always come back, but this time, after a few days. But this time it was a week. But when he came back, he had a German medal pinned on his jacket. I guess he was hanging out with the Germans. Pretty famous dog. He's got these 3 chevrons up here, one of them each for 6 months of service. He's got the Yankee Division patch here. Very popular. He came home and did some war bond drives. There wasn't many parades. There's his owner back there, Jay Conroy. And they put a little flag on him as he marched. He met 2 presidents, Harding and Coolidge, and also Blackjack Pershing as well too. He's very impressed by his service. And now the show's over. Perhaps a little long-winded, but anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much, Mark, for all the research you had to go through to get this
Oh, it's my
all
pleasure.
put together, and also for delivering it to us tonight.